Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Virtually the entire middle reaches began to shake because of the voice. Countless embattled cultivators felt their minds reeling. Before anyone could react, Bruiser suddenly shivered, then threw his head back and let out a howl of joy. Song Junwan's jaw dropped, and the despair of death that had existed in her eyes was replaced by incredulity. She suddenly turned to look at the horizon, where an airship was speeding through the air, with a person just barely visible on the deck. Of course, a battlefield with tens upon tens of thousands of combatants would obviously be filled with shocking levels of noise. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun's voice was like a rock dropped into a lake, which only sent a few ripples out. The enemy forces didn't take it very seriously. In fact, a group of several hundred cultivators from the three sects spun and then began to fly toward Bai Xiaochun to block his path. Two in that group were nascent soul cultivators, who closed in on him from two different directions. Even Song Junwan, after her initial excitement, came to the conclusion that Bai Xiaochun wouldn't make much of a difference in the fight. Furthermore, the five nascent soul cultivators who had been closing in, after their initial pause, snorted coldly and pressed the attack. Two of them focused on Master Limitless, and three on Song Junwan. Because she wielded Middle Peak's blood sword, Song Junwan was able to fight back against nascent soul experts. Furthermore, she led a group of Middle Peak disciples who were adept at sword formations that could inflict injuries on anyone under the nascent soul stage. They were a formidable force that the enemy disciples knew they had to completely crush before they could proceed onward into the sect headquarters. The three nascent soul experts who were targeting Song Junwan closed in with immense speed. Even at peak condition, the Middle Peak disciples that Song Junwan commanded wouldn't be able to stop them. Therefore, they could only watch helplessly as Song Junwan was put in imminent life or death danger. No one was capable of turning the situation around. When Bai Xiaochun saw what was happening, and realized what critical danger the river-defying sect was in, he was gripped with uncontrollable madness. Eyes crimson, he pushed the airship forward with such speed that it began to burn up. Then, he slammed into the group of hundreds of disciples who were besieging Song Junwan. Rumbling booms echoed out. Of those hundreds of disciples, none could even get close to Bai Xiaochun. In fact, because of the intense flames which surrounded the airship, the entire group was instantly transformed into ash, killed in body and soul. The airship shot through the sky like a deadly sword, crushing anything in its path as it descended toward the ground. No one could block it, or even get close to it. Any who tried to were wiped out of existence. And then, he arrived right in the middle of the battlefield, next to the Bloodstream division in Song Junwan. He moved so quickly that he arrived just when the three nascent soul experts were bearing down on Song Junwan. Before they could actually unleash their attacks, an ear-piercing sound assaulted their ears. Two of them were in the early nascent soul stage, and one in the mid-stage. They only had time to turn their heads, whereupon they saw nothing but the image of an enormous, burning airship. The airship didn't slow down at all. It slammed into the three nascent soul experts, a destructive force that didn't even allow them to cry out in pain. They were engulfed by flame and force, and transformed into nothing more than ash. The two cultivators who had been focusing on Master Limitless coughed up blood. Expressions of disbelief appeared on their faces, and their eyes nearly bulged out of their skulls as they began to fall back. Bai Xiaochun strode out from the flaming wreckage of the airship to appear in front of Song Junwan. Wrapping his arm around her waist, he waved his hand, isolating nearly 1,000 streams of destructive power that had been unleashed by the destroyed airship. Then he sent those streams of destruction smashing into anyone in the area who wasn't a member of the river-defying sect. Not even the two nascent soul cultivators could escape, and were enveloped by pure death. Miserable screams erupted onto the battlefield as thousands of cultivators were engulfed by flames, and then burned down to ash. Although all of this takes a bit of time to describe, it happened in the briefest of moments. It took only the blink of an eye for Bai Xiaochun to kill 5 nascent soul experts, and thousands of other cultivators. It happened so quickly that nobody could even react. Shock immediately began to spread across the battlefield, and countless gazes shifted to focus on Bai Xiaochun. After an initial hush, the cultivators from the 3 sects began to gasp and cry aloud. Heavens! What just happened? Damn it! Who is that? He looks familiar. As the enemy cultivators reacted in shock, the river-defying sect disciples began to cry out loud in excitement. Bai Xiaochun! It's Bai Xiaochun! Sect Uncle Bai! It's Sect Uncle Bai! Bai Xiaochun! Before long, everyone was crying Bai Xiaochun's name. Shangguan Tianyu, Beihan Lai, Patriarch Spirit Stream, Patriarch Bloodstream, the monkey, the rabbit, and countless other people were shaken to the core. Powerful experts who had once been chosen in the three sects were now pillars of their respective organizations. Hatred existed in their eyes, for on their faces and other body parts existed the mark of a turtle. The three diva patriarchs all wore frowns, but at the moment didn't have time to deal with Bai Xiaochun. Although they were shocked by his sudden appearance on the battlefield and his unusual battle prowess, they were still confident that he was only in the great circle of the nascent soul stage. Ignore him. Once we destroy the foundation of the river-defying sect, then we can kill him. Having made their mutual decision, the three devas looked away from Bai Xiaochun and continued on with their original plan. Patriarch Starry River was the one using the sky-obfuscating hand to unleash crushing power onto Patriarch Spirit Stream, the monkey, the rabbit, and the blood ancestor. Patriarch Dao River bristled with sword chi, and his eyes glittered with greed as he eyed Bruiser. Then there was Patriarch Polarity River, beneath whose feet roiled a black cloud. Under his destructive attacks, the main entrance to the river-defying sect was already on the verge of being reduced to ruins. Those three devas had already surpassed the will of the heavens, causing the sky to vibrate and the clouds to churn. Song Junwan was deeply shaken as she looked up at Bai Xiaochun, her mouth hanging open, but no words coming out. She felt like she was dreaming. There were a million things Bai Xiaochun wanted to say to her, but currently, it was a moment of grave crisis for the sect, and there was no time. Waving his hand, he summoned a shimmering shield to surround her, something that not even a diva would be able to break through. Then, he looked over at the three devas who were unleashing unbridled destructive power onto the river-defying sect. He knew that they were the key to everything. If he could crush them, the tide of battle would be turned. They're only in the early diva realm. How dare they behave rudely in front of me? Bai Xiaochun's eyes were completely bloodshot, especially when he saw all of the streams of sword chi surrounding Patriarch Dao River, and how he was trying so hard to cut down Bruiser. Bai Xiaochun opened his heaven-span Dharma eye, sending violet light spilling out. Then, he blurred into motion, moving faster than lightning in the direction of the sect headquarters itself. Bruiser was there in the sect headquarters, bursting with excitement despite the danger he currently faced. His enthusiasm even seemed to give him an extra burst of power, and yet, he knew how to refrain from being impulsive. The black sea of flames beneath his feet roared to life, surrounding him as he backed away from the fighting. At the same time, Patriarch Dao River performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, causing the sword chi around him to converge into the shape of an illusory greatsword, which thrummed with the will of the heavens as it slashed toward Bruiser. Patriarch Dao River didn't deign to pay any attention to Bai Xiaochun, nor the violet beam of light that shot out from his third eye. The man simply waved his sleeve, sending a portion of sword chi out to intercept it. However, the instant the sword chi touched the violet light, the sword chi shattered, completely incapable of standing up to the violet light. Shocked, Patriarch Dao River tried to back up, but couldn't avoid the light. It latched onto him, and instantly took control of his body. His face fell, and his heart began to pound as Bai Xiaochun blurred to a stop. Right in front of Bruiser. Bruiser let out an excited howl, unable to prevent the joy from burning in his eyes. Bai Xiaochun was essentially Bruiser's father, someone who could solve any problems. Bruiser depended on Bai Xiaochun in the way that only relatives could. Bai Xiaochun immediately let out a shout, shoving his right fist out toward the greatsword. When Patriarch Dao River saw that, he immediately relaxed a bit, and his eyes began to shine with coldness. This violet light is strange, but this kid is too young and inexperienced. I can't believe he didn't take the opportunity to try to injure me. For him to make contact with my incisive sword chi is simply courting. However, before he could even finish his inner monologue, his eyes bulged as surely as if he had seen a ghost. When the sword chi in which he had placed so much confidence struck Bai Xiaochun's fist, a popping sound could be heard, and the sword chi shattered. It couldn't have collapsed more surely if it had encountered a metal wall. As for Bai Xiaochun, he wasn't harmed at all as the remnants of the sword chi scattered in all directions. Patriarch Dao River shivered and gasped. The fact that Bai Xiaochun wasn't harmed at all by power comparable to the will of the heavens was shocking, to say the least. You're a diva too, he blurted. When the people in the area heard that, they were immediately shaken, and looked over with disbelieving eyes. As for the river-defying sect disciples, their excitement began to mount. Inside the blood ancestor, Patriarch Spirit Stream and Patriarch Bloodstream were both delightedly shocked, as was the monkey. In contrast, Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Polarity River were both shaken, and their killing intent grew more pronounced. Have a death wish? Bai Xiaochun growled, his eyes completely bloodshot because of all the wounds and scars he could see on Bruiser, especially that vicious neck wound. Howling in rage, he shot toward Patriarch Dao River. Patriarch Dao River's heart sank. However, he was a diva. It didn't matter that he was only in the mortal Dao level, he was still proud and arrogant. Therefore, he performed an incantation gesture with both hands, causing more streams of sword chi to erupt out. Numerous great swords appeared, fully 100,000 of them, which then descended onto Bai Xiaochun like rain. Any one of those swords could seriously injure a nascent soul cultivator. They contained Patriarch Dao River's will, which surpassed that of the heavens, and also contained a huge convergence of the energy of heaven and earth. His goal was obviously to kill Bai Xiaochun as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Patriarchs Starry River and Polarity River began to rush over to help cut this cocky Bai Xiaochun down to size. As the two other patriarchs took to motion, Patriarch Dao River's 100,000 great swords bore down on Bai Xiaochun. As for Bai Xiaochun, he strode forward, unleashing the explosive fleshly body power of the Great Circle of the Undying Bones. With that power, he utilized the mountain-shaking bash. It was an incredible level of energy that caused heaven to shake and the earth to rumble. He shot forward with blinding speed, looking very much like a vicious beast from primordial times. The air shattered around him as he moved, and to the shock of Patriarch Dao River, he was right in front of him before the rain of swords could even land. A boom rang out, and blood sprayed from Patriarch Dao River's mouth. He tried to fall back, but before he could, Bai Xiaochun took advantage of the momentum he had built up to reach out with this thumb and index finger. Black light flashed, along with a powerful gravitational force. It was none other than the throat-crushing grasp. A tremor passed through the retreating patriarch, and his eyes lit with terror as Bai Xiaochun closed in on his neck with lightning-like speed. It was a critical moment, and Patriarch Dao River had no time to ponder what to do. It wasn't that he had never fought with other devas before, it was that he had never encountered someone as shockingly fast as Bai Xiaochun. He seemed brutal, as though he had veins of steel that made him willing to die fighting with his enemy. It was a madness that seemed bereft of any and all reason. And yet, at the same time, there was something crafty and intelligent within his killing intent, something that was like battle instinct. The massive waves of shock that battered at Patriarch Dao River's mind caused him to gasp loudly. Patriarchs Starry River and Polarity River had no time to offer backup. Roaring, Patriarch Dao River sent the 100,000 great swords swirling through the air to try to block Bai Xiaochun. As the rain of swords closed in, Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered, and he completely ignored them. Instead, he dashed forward, reached out, and grabbed the patriarch's right arm. Then, he squeezed down. The shocking power of the throat-crushing grasp caused cracking sounds to fill the air as the diva's arm was ripped to shreds. His entire arm was completely destroyed. A shrill scream escaped his lips, and his face turned ashen. Madness lit up his eyes, and yet, within that madness was shock. This was the most powerful enemy he had encountered since becoming a diva. All of a sudden, he had no desire to fight Bai Xiaochun one-on-one. Taking a deep breath, he burned longevity to power a secret magic that propelled him backward at incredible speed. However, in the moment that he took to motion, Bai Xiaochun unhesitatingly utilized his undying hex. Everything in the world suddenly slowed down, with the exception of himself. Then, he burst into motion as he chased after the fleeing Patriarch Dao River. What everyone else saw was Bai Xiaochun seemingly moving faster than sound as he pursued the patriarch. He caught up in the briefest of moments, whereupon he clenched his hand into a fist and then punched out with diva-level fleshly body power, adding in energy from his cultivation base. Blood sprayed out of the diva's mouth as his chest caved in. His life force was fading rapidly, and his expression was one of complete terror. He immediately began to contemplate other ways to flee. As of this moment, he could clearly sense the shadow of death. Patriarchs Starry River and Polarity River were urgently rushing over, but Bai Xiaochun had attacked with such unbelievable speed that they still hadn't arrived. Unfortunately, they were very close. Realizing that, Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered, and a tremendous burst of frigid chi appeared, filling everything within a 3,000-meter area. It was like a frigid lake, or a frigid domain. Furthermore, within that domain, appeared 9 projections of Bai Xiaochun. They shot like lightning toward Patriarch Dao River, and before he could do anything, pierced through him multiple times, provoking a blood-curdling scream. Booms rang out as the Patriarch's head flew through the air, and the rest of his body exploded. He remained in existence only in nascent divinity form, utilizing a secret magic and other life-saving magical items to evade destruction. Flickering weakly, and screaming in terror the entire time, he flew away, leaving behind the shattered remnants of his fleshly body. Bai Xiaochun knew that he couldn't chase Patriarch Dao River any further at the moment. Snorting coldly, he sent the 9 projections of himself down to the battlefield below. Wherever they went, they cut down their enemies with impunity. The nascent soul cultivators were especially targeted, and it only took a short time for roughly 10 to be slaughtered. That was the limit of Bai Xiaochun's frigid domain when in the great circle of the nascent soul stage. He could create multiple powerful projections, but they could only last for so long. And yet, it had only taken a few short breaths of time for him to cut down more than a dozen nascent soul experts on the battlefield below, and also destroy Patriarch Dao River's fleshly body, leaving him fleeing in nascent divinity form. Everyone felt as shaken as if they had been struck by numerous bolts of lightning. This is impossible, Patriarch, this. How could this be happening? What's the level of his cultivation base? It only took a few breaths of time for him to cut down multiple nascent soul experts, and even defeat a diva. The cultivators from the 3 sects were completely astonished, and were trembling in disbelieving fear. To see Bai Xiaochun handily defeat the diva patriarch from the Dao River court, who then ran away like a stray dog, left them on the verge of collapsing mentally. That was especially true of the cultivators from the Dao River court, who were the most terrified of all. In the past, Bai Xiaochun had marked all of the chosen from these 3 sects with turtle marks. Now, he had them shaking in terror, hardly able to believe what they were seeing. The fact that their patriarch had almost been killed, and fled in bedraggled fashion, proved that Bai Xiaochun was now unimaginably powerful. The morale of the 3 sects' cultivators was dropping rapidly. In contrast, the cultivators of the river-defying sect began to cheer at the tops of their lungs. They simply couldn't control their excitement. The river-defying sect had been under great pressure for too long. For years, they had been bullied by the other 3 sects, even when disciples went out for training. The friction had become so bad that some disciples had been killed in the resulting conflicts. Unfortunately, the river-defying sect just wasn't strong enough. For the sake of the bigger picture, in the hopes of preventing things from escalating too quickly, and especially to avoid giving the 3 sects an excuse to attack, they had simply endured. But despite how they had endured, the 3 sects had managed to get tacit approval from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect to exterminate the river-defying sect. And therefore, the hatred the river-defying sect disciples felt toward the 3 sects had reached an unimaginable degree. They simply couldn't exist under the same sky together. Now, a mighty diva patriarch had been beaten and sent running. It was so exciting that the river-defying sect disciples couldn't contain themselves. Most important was Bai Xiaochun. He was the spirit and heart of the river-defying sect. He had even come up with the name of the sect. He was their pride and joy, someone who truly deserved to be referred to as a consummate chosen. Sect Grandfather Bai, Sect Grandfather Bai, Sect Grandfather Bai. It was hard to say who called it out first, but soon everyone in the river-defying sect was shouting the same thing, creating sound waves that rolled out in all directions. Song Junwan was completely swept up in the excitement. To see Bai Xiaochun standing right here in front of her was like a dream that caused tears of joy to well up in her eyes. Shangguan Tianyu said nothing. He looked exhausted, and had mixed emotions in his eyes. However, many years had passed, and he had changed. He was no longer the type to be easily excited. Beihan Lai's hands were clenched into fists as he glared hatefully at the disciples of the 3 sects. A corpse lay nearby, the corpse of a black dog. Shortly before Bai Xiaochun had arrived, that black dog had fought to the death to protect him. Within the sect headquarters, Patriarch Bloodstream was inside the blood ancestor, trembling with excitement. Even he had been despairing moments ago, but now, he suddenly found himself thinking about what Bai Xiaochun had looked like as Night Crypt all those years ago on Middle Peak. The rabbit stood on the blood ancestor's head, looking at Bai Xiaochun, muttering in a voice too low for anyone to hear. Patriarch Spirit Stream, Zheng Yuandong, and the monkey were all looking at the hope of the sect. This is the miracle I was talking about, the monkey murmured, his eyes shining with brilliant light. As the river-defying sect brimmed with excitement, Bai Xiaochun looked over at the destroyed fleshly body of Patriarch Dao River, and at his fleeing nascent divinity. Then he turned to look at Patriarchs Starry River and Polarity River, who were so shaken by the defeat of the other diva that they didn't dare to continue their advance. Because they were devas, and understood the diva realm well, they were more flustered than anyone else. They knew that although Patriarch Dao River had only been in the early diva realm, the techniques he used made him the strongest of all of them. And yet, he had been defeated within a few breaths of time by Bai Xiaochun. They could tell that, were it not for the fact that the chaos of the battlefield prevented Bai Xiaochun from giving chase, Patriarch Dao River would have a hard time escaping with his life. Bai Xiaochun could kill devas. It was a realization that shook the two remaining patriarchs to the core. Because devas could supplant heavenly will, the spiritual power they had access to, as well as their magical techniques and divine abilities, all contained the might of creation. They were like gods to all lower cultivators, and were beings that were virtually impossible to kill. Only someone who was also in the early Diva realm would have a chance at beating someone like that. Furthermore, it would be difficult to end the fight with a kill. Therefore, what they had just seen play out in front of them seemed almost impossible. As Bai Xiaochun looked over at them, they both unleashed the power of their cultivation bases. "Why don't we stop fighting for today, Bai Xiaochun?" Patriarch Starry River said. "We only made a move because the river-defying sect had no diva," Patriarch Polarity River added in. "But seeing that you do, well, I guess this was all a big misunderstanding." Neither of them wanted to keep on fighting. The truth was that they weren't confident in being able to handle the terrifying Bai Xiaochun. Therefore, they both tried to play on his concern for the river-defying sect to end things. "Don't just think about yourself, Bai Xiaochun. You have to consider the other disciples of the river-defying sect. They've been fighting for a long time as it is. There really isn't a need for any more fighting and killing." "That's right. Our three sects still have the advantage. If we keep going, it won't benefit the river-defying sect. Besides, your people are all exhausted. If they keep going now, there will surely be more injuries and deaths. You have to think of your fellow disciples." As Bai Xiaochun hovered there looking at them coldly, Patriarch Spirit Stream looked up from within the sect headquarters and shouted, "If we don't crush the enemy, how could things be over? Can the blood of the river-defying sect be spilt so casually? This place is not one they can blithely intrude upon, and then just waltz away." The eyes of the other disciples turned crimson, and they began to shout in rage. "Patriarch, do something. We're all willing to keep fighting. They invaded our river-defying sect, now they have to pay the price in blood." As the shouting grew more intense, the army from the three sects began to tremble. At the moment, they had no desire to fight at all, and in fact, began to edge away. When Bai Xiaochun saw what was happening, his killing intent began to burn with even more intensity. Then, rumbling sounds echoed out as he shot toward the two remaining devas. Although he wasn't a fan of killing, he knew that it was just as Patriarch Spirit Stream had said. These people had attacked the river-defying sect, and they had to pay the price. Taking the fleshly body away from one measly diva was not enough. Patriarchs Starry River and Polarity River felt their hearts pounding in their chests. Their faces fell as they realized that they could not avoid this fight. Considering that, they took solace in the fact that, although they might not be able to defeat Bai Xiaochun if they fought him one-on-one, they could still join forces. Eyes flashing with determination, they unleashed their most powerful divine abilities. Heaven and earth shook violently as countless heavenly bodies materialized around Patriarch Starry River. As for Patriarch Polarity River, he knew he was facing a formidable opponent. A devilish will erupted around him as he summoned a massive devil projection with 1,000 arms. Then, both of them charged toward Bai Xiaochun in attack. A grand battle of devas was about to begin. The instant Patriarchs Starry River and Polarity River attacked, Bai Xiaochun's eyes glittered. Although it couldn't be said that he had copious amounts of experience fighting devas, he had fought more than a few during his time in the wildlands. Whether it was the three patriarchs in Giant Ghost City, the Heavenly Dukes in Arch-Emperor City, Mistress Red Dust, who he had fought on more than one occasion, or even that spectacular battle of battles, they had all had a very profound effect on him. It was because of all that experience that he actually didn't feel very apprehensive when facing devas. Furthermore, as he prepared to fight these two devas, his mind was alive with various thoughts. His thoughts moved so quickly that he was virtually acting on instinct. He could immediately sense that, although he could fight these two, it would be dangerous. Furthermore, if they attempted to distract him by attacking and killing other disciples in the area, the consequences could be dire, to say the least. In fact, if the three of them had done that from the very beginning, things might have turned out very differently. Even if Bai Xiaochun had been more confident than he was, it would have been a difficult situation to deal with. After all, this was the river-defying sect. Bai Xiaochun could not simply flee the battlefield, whereas his opponents could. That was one reason why he had attacked like lightning and crippled one of his opponents right off the bat. Now there were only two devas left, and yet, he still had many concerns to deal with. The entire river-defying sect was a battlefield now, with booms and bangs echoing out everywhere. It was only by achieving a spectacular and decisive victory in the first exchange that he could inspire the cultivators of the river-defying sect, and shake the hearts of the three sects. All of these things occupied his thoughts. However, by this point in his life, he had developed exceptional awareness of how to do battle, and therefore, it was without the slightest hesitation that, as the two devas closed in on him, he utilized his undying hex. He suddenly moved with a speed that surpassed teleportation, veering away from Patriarch Starry River and bearing down on Patriarch Polarity River. At the same time, he opened his third eye, and rotated his cultivation base at full measure, focusing his heavenspan Dharma eye directly on Patriarch Starry River. That patriarch shivered physically as the shocking power of gravitational repulsion became like fetters, like a giant invisible hand that grabbed him and held him in place. As Patriarch Starry River's face fell because of the shocking effects of the magical eye, Bai Xiaochun approached Patriarch Polarity River with lightning speed. Patriarch Starry River had his black mist incarnated as a starry sky filled with heavenly bodies and asteroids. It was something that could affect a wide area, and although it wasn't necessarily a big threat to Bai Xiaochun, he knew that if the patriarch turned it onto the river-defying sect disciples, the consequences would be unimaginable. As for the devilish god that the Polarity River Court Diva had summoned, it had shocking battle prowess, and yet Bai Xiaochun didn't even pause for thought before rushing in that very direction. Everything happened in the mere blink of an eye. As soon as Patriarch Starry River was locked down, Bai Xiaochun accelerated rapidly, arriving right in front of Patriarch Polarity River. There, he clenched his hand into a fist and unleashed a fist strike. The fist strike shook heaven and earth, unleashing explosive fleshly body power in a massive whirlwind that bore down on the patriarch. The patriarch's face fell. Howling, he performed an incantation gesture, causing the devilish god to take a step forward and merge with him. Then, devil chi erupted out wildly, forming a buckler which he thrust out to defend himself. A boom rang out as Bai Xiaochun's fist made contact with the buckler of devil chi. The buckler emitted cracking sounds for a short moment before collapsing, and yet, even as it did, a second buckler appeared, and then a third. Bai Xiaochun had no time for thought or planning. Instead of backing up, he performed an incantation gesture and lunged forward. Living Mountain Incantation. Rumble. Countless rocks and stones in the area flew up into the air, forming around Bai Xiaochun until he was an enormous stone golem. He was now hundreds of meters tall and bursting with heaven-shaking, earth-shattering energy. In addition, the Living Mountain Incantation augmented his fleshly body power, making him seem supremely disdainful of everything in sight. Striking out with his fist, he destroyed the second buckler, as well as the third and the fourth. Shock covered the face of Patriarch Polarity River because of how quickly everything was happening. Before he could do anything else, Bai Xiaochun, still in Living Mountain Incantation form, unleashed his mountain-shaking bash. As the devil form Patriarch Polarity River lunged backward, Patriarch Starry River struggled furiously against the bonds which held him. Finally, they broke, and he prepared to join in on fighting Bai Xiaochun. However, that was when Bai Xiaochun suddenly looked over his shoulder, once again focusing the gaze of his heavenspan Dharma eye on Patriarch Starry River. Rumbling sounds echoed out as, to the madness and frustration of the patriarch, he was once again locked in place by this vile opponent. As he struggled, Bai Xiaochun continued onward toward Patriarch Polarity River, using the Living Mountain Incantation to full effect in another attack. Bangs rang out as, in the blink of an eye, Bai Xiaochun unleashed dozens of punches, all of which landed on Patriarch Polarity River's devilish god form. Again and again he was shoved backward, slowly pushing him away from Patriarch Starry River. It was a profoundly shocking sight that had many observing cultivators reeling, not only from Bai Xiaochun's shocking display of power, but from how instinctively he fought. In the shortest of moments, he had used magical power to lock down one opponent, and fleshly body power to unleash devastating force on another. Patriarch Polarity River was teetering on the verge of insanity. Bai Xiaochun's devastating windstorm of an attack had his chi and blood in chaos. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth, and yet, things were not over yet. Just when he was about to prepare a counterattack, Bai Xiaochun's eyes flickered, and he let out a powerful shout. As he did, his Living Mountain Incantation form collapsed, and all of the rocks shot out in front of him to create a gigantic fist. It was that fist that landed onto Patriarch Polarity River's devilish god form. An ear-splitting boom filled the battlefield. The devilish god body shattered, revealing the Patriarch's true self, blood spraying out of his mouth, his expression that of shock. At this point, Bai Xiaochun again turned and unleashed the power of his heavenspan Dharma eye, reinforcing the bonds locking down Patriarch Starry River, who had been just about to free himself. Patriarch Starry River was filled with indescribable anxiety and frustration. He immediately began to resort to any means necessary, even those that caused dangerous backlashes, to try to escape. Aware that he wasn't a match for Bai Xiaochun, he knew that his only chance was to start attacking the bystanders in the hopes of distracting him. However, it was in that very moment that intense killing intent flickered in Bai Xiaochun's eyes. Taking another step toward Patriarch Polarity River, he performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and then waved his finger, yet again summoning his frigid domain. The entire 500-kilometer area iced over, and 9 shadowy projections appeared, which slashed toward Patriarch Polarity River like 9 sharp blades. "You're a useless bastard, Patriarch Starry River." Patriarch Polarity River screamed. The two patriarchs had agreed to work together, but Patriarch Starry River had been bound in place multiple times, making it completely impossible for him to help. As a result, Patriarch Polarity River had come to hate Patriarch Starry River even more than he hated Bai Xiaochun. Unlike Patriarch Starry River, he didn't have a special divine ability to protect his nascent divinity from a deadly attack. If he were to be cut down in battle, he would die beyond the shadow of a doubt. It was a moment of deadly crisis, and as such, madness lit up his eyes. Even as Bai Xiaochun's 9 frigid clones closed in on him, he chose to resort to fleshly body self-detonation. Boom! Upon self-detonating, he could send the resulting ripples of force out to destroy the 9 frigid clones. Few people would have the resolve to make a decision like that in the mere time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint. But Devas were the type of people who had experienced countless battles, and could react on an instinctual level in many situations. As Patriarch Polarity River exploded, the resulting shockwave shattered the 500-kilometer frigid domain and overwhelmed the 9 frigid clones. At the same time, the Patriarch's nascent divinity shot out and began to flee at the highest speed possible. He was afraid, more afraid than he had ever been before in his life. Furthermore, his hatred for Patriarch Starry River only continued to grow more intense. As far as he was concerned, if it wasn't for that useless patriarch, they would have been able to achieve a victory. But now, Patriarch Starry River was unharmed, whereas Patriarch Polarity River had destroyed his fleshly body, leaving behind only his nascent divinity. His heart throbbed with animosity and terror, and he already had begun to wish that Bai Xiaochun's magical eye had locked onto him instead. As all of those things happened, Patriarch Starry River drew dangerously upon his cultivation base to break free from the power of Bai Xiaochun's heaven-span Dharma eye. He could hear the howls of rage coming from Patriarch Polarity River, and the truth was that he was equally furious. But at the same time, he was deeply astonished. Panting, he looked at Bai Xiaochun, a person who attacked with unbridled madness, whose mountain-toppling, sea-draining blows had destroyed a diva's fleshly body and forced him to flee in nascent divinity form. If it had only been once, he might have been able to accept it. But in defiance of all imagination, he had witnessed it a second time. Shivering, he chose to not even try to help Patriarch Polarity River, and instead turned around and fled in the opposite direction. The scene which had just played out left him shaken and filled with fear, to the point where he didn't care at all about his reputation, or the fact that tens upon tens of thousands of cultivators from the 3 sects were watching. As he fled, he reminded himself that Bai Xiaochun was absolutely terrifying, and that if he didn't flee, he would be in deadly danger. The sight of Patriarch Polarity River being reduced to a nascent divinity, and Patriarch Starry River fleeing in fear, caused shouts of alarm and rage to rise up from the cultivators down on the ground. The shouts of alarm came from the Dao River Court and the Starry River Court, whereas the shouts of rage came from the Polarity River Court. Patriarch Starry River, you. Bai Xiaochun was quite taken aback. He had assumed that Patriarch Starry River would instantly attack him after freeing himself, or at least try to stop him from pursuing the other patriarch. He never could have guessed that the man would just up and flee. How shameless of you, you bastard. Patriarch Polarity River howled. At this point, his nascent divinity felt unstable, and his spiritual energy weak to the point of near collapse. One of them was fleeing to the east, and the other to the west. As for Bai Xiaochun, his eyes burned with killing intent. Had Patriarch Starry River come after him, he would never have been able to finish off Patriarch Polarity River. But now that both of them were fleeing, that meant he did have a chance to kill a diva. It was without hesitation that he ignored Patriarch Starry River, and locked his gaze onto the nascent divinity form of Patriarch Polarity River. Killing intent seething, he threw his arms up into the air. Water swamp. Water vapor erupted out in all directions, instantly enveloping both of the fleeing patriarchs. From a distance, it looked as if all heaven and earth had transformed into a watery swamp. Mist roiled, and heaven shaking, earth-shattering pressure weighed down everywhere, provoking gasps from the cultivators in the area. Up in the air, Patriarch Polarity River suddenly felt the most intense, terrifying sensation of imminent danger that he had ever felt in his entire life. "No," he shrieked, the pleading, begging tone in his voice clear for all to hear. The fleeing Patriarch Starry River was shocked, but he simply bit his tongue and focused on picking up speed as he fled. Under the shocked gazes of everyone present, Bai Xiaochun's eyes flashed, and he threw his hands down. Kingdom, rrrruumble. The sound which exploded out surpassed heavenly thunder. As Bai Xiaochun's water swamp kingdom was unleashed, curved mountains shot up into the sky. All of a sudden, the entire world seemed to be taken over by some shockingly large beast who wielded mountain-toppling, sea-draining power. The sky went dim until it was almost black. However, it was still possible to see that, stretching out from within the watery swamp, clear for all to see, was the clawed hand of a beast. That's the water swamp kingdom. The eyes of the Spirit Stream Division cultivators went wide, especially those who had come from the former North Bank. What they were seeing completely defied all expectation and imagination. As the enormous, clawed hand shot out from the watery swamp, minds went blank as both Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Polarity River were struck by the claws. Rrrrruumble. Mixed in with the deafening crash was the miserable shriek of Patriarch Polarity River. He attempted teleportations and other techniques to try to evade the clawed hand, but nothing did any good. In the blink of an eye, he was struck. Before his scream could be fully voiced, his nascent divinity's eyes went wide, taking in his last view of the world. Then his nascent divinity was destroyed, and the Patriarch was wiped off of the face of all creation. He had been killed in body and soul. Patriarch Starry River still had his fleshly body and furthermore was on the very edge of the watery swamp. Therefore, he wasn't as badly hurt. Roaring, he summoned countless stars and heavenly bodies to defend himself and managed to escape, coughing up blood and terrified, but alive. Upon seeing the other Patriarch's nascent divinity destroyed, he was frightened, but at the same time convinced that his action of fleeing so decisively was the main reason he had escaped with his life. He also considered himself lucky that he had been the one Bai Xiaochun picked to bind with fetters. If it had been the other way around, he would likely be dead right now. You died, fellow Taoist, and I lived. If you want to blame someone, Patriarch Polarity River, don't blame me for not saving you, blame yourself for being too weak. Feeling profoundly lucky, the Patriarch sped away. Bai Xiaochun hovered there over the battlefield, watching the Patriarch flee off into the distance. The man was moving too quickly to catch up with, and besides, although he didn't look tired at all after crushing 2 devas in a row and killing one of them, it had taken all of his cultivation base and fleshly body power to do it. He was mentally and physically exhausted. Although defeating someone in the early Diva realm was not very difficult, killing someone of that level was. Furthermore, he had used his Heavenspan Dharma Eye 3 times in a row to lock a Diva down. That alone had his chi and blood in chaos, kept in force only by the power of his fleshly body. The truth was that he couldn't have done it a 4th time. Furthermore, if Patriarch Starry River had attacked him, then he would have only had one trump card left. His undying Emperor's Fist. That would have left him completely and utterly powerless, without a scrap of energy left to battle. At that point, if Patriarch Tao River had come back, he would have been in serious danger. Although he looked majestic as he hovered there, he was actually in bad shape, and extremely tired. However, when he looked down at the deathly pale faces of the cultivators of the 3 sects, he realized that this was a good opportunity to shake them a bit more. Glaring off into the distance at Patriarch Starry River, he swished his sleeve. I'll give you 3 breaths of time to get out of my sight, Patriarch Starry River. If you don't, then I'll swish my sleeve again, and reduce you to ashes. When Patriarch Starry River heard that, terror gripped his heart, and his mind began to spin. Holding nothing back, he drew upon his longevity for another burst of speed, and then disappeared over the horizon. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.